Welcome to this explainer. We usually picture ancient Greek philosophy as this incredibly sterile, super logical thing, right? Just a bunch of guys in togas having polite debates. But actually, the truth is way darker, much more dangerous, and honestly, vastly more interesting. We're going to dive right into an intellectual detective story today that centers on a really profound paradox about how we think, how we heal, and how we confront the absolute chaos of life. So imagine you're standing on the edge of the ancient world. There's this myth about a young maiden or a thea who gets swept away by the fierce north wind while playing on the rocks. But she wasn't alone. She was actually playing with a nymph named Pharmakia. And here's the thing. That is not just a myth. It is a massive clue. Because in ancient Greek, Pharmakia doesn't just mean a nymph. It literally translates to the use of herbs, drugs, or potions. We see this everywhere in Greek mythology. Think about Persephone or Eurydice. They're gathering these beautiful, intoxicating flowers right before something violent or transcendent happens. The flowers are beautiful, sure, but they're ultimately extremely dangerous.
Section 1. The Mystery of Pharmakon.
To really grasp how the Greeks managed their own existential chaos, we've got to look at the scene of the crime and decode this strange word. The modern philosopher Jacques Derrida completely flips how we look at this. He points out that translating pharmakon as just drug or just poison totally erases its dual nature. It is a polysemic word. That means it holds all these contradicting definitions at the exact same time. A pharmakon is a remedy that cures you, a poison that kills you, a mind-altering drug, and even a scapegoat sacrificed for the good of the city. It's absolute ambivalence. It has the power to heal and the exact same power to destroy. It all just depends on the dose and the context. Socrates actually illustrates this perfectly with a story about the god Thuth, who invented writing. So Thuth goes up to King Thamus and proudly presents written letters, claiming he's invented a pharmakon, a cure for memory and wisdom. But the king, he flat out rejects it. He's like, no, this isn't a cure, this is a poison. He argues that relying on external written words will actually make the soul forgetful. People will stop using their true internal memory, the logos, and just rely on this external illusion, which only gives them false wisdom. So right off the bat, we see that intellectual tools, even writing and philosophy, are a type of venom. They can heal your mind or they can completely corrupt it.
Section 2. The 4 Divine Manias.
Okay, so if philosophy and words are basically these magical potions that alter your soul, what kind of divine madness or manias do they actually trigger? Well, Socrates mapped out the terrifying, chaotic forces of the world into 4 very specific types of divine madness, and each one corresponds to a specific god, a directional wind, and crucially, its own psychoactive substance or pharmakon. First up, the prophetic mania of Apollo, that's blown in by the north wind and fueled by intoxicating vapors and the laurel tree. Next is the initiatory or mystical mania of Dionysus. Think of the burning south wind of death and rebirth, catalyzed by wine. Then we've got the poetic mania of the Muses, riding that shifting east wind, linked to opium and the hypnotic trance of music. And finally, the erotic mania of Aphrodite and Eros, brought in by the gentle west wind and sparked by aphrodisiacs. These are not just abstract ideas. They are radical, chemical-like alterations of the human state.
Section 3. Socrates, Healer, and Poisoner. Now here is where it gets really crazy. Socrates didn't just stand back and philosophize about these chaotic forces from a safe distance. He actually embodied them. He was like a philosophical sorcerer, administering his own venom to the city of Athens. If you read the ancient texts, talking to Socrates is constantly described as being bitten, stung, or poisoned. Using his relentless questioning, he acted like 4 biting animals, which perfectly match up with those 4 manias we just talked about. As the gadfly, he bites to disturb the lazy city. That's prophetic mania waking people up. As the snake, he injects a venom that causes this internal fever, forcing a mystical initiatory catharsis. As the bee, he stings for higher truth, showing that poetic readiness to literally die for philosophy. And then, most famously, he's the stingray. His complex questions numb and paralyze his opponents into a state called aporia. That painful paralysis mirrors erotic mania. It's a loss of control that forces you to desperately search for true knowledge. He was literally poisoning their ignorance in order to cure their souls.
Section 4. Poisons and Antidotes.
Which naturally brings up a pretty massive question, right? If Socrates' words were essentially venom, how did his students survive the bite without going completely insane? Well, ancient pharmacology actually split toxin defenses into two super clever categories. On one side, you have the pharmakon. This is an external shield. Think of it like a protective spell or a barrier used to repel foreign poisons. But on the other side, you have something way more fascinating, the theriac. A theriac is an internal antidote. And get this, it's derived from the actual flesh and venom of the poisonous beast itself. It works on the principle that the viper carries the cure to its own venom right inside its own body. So a theriac fights the poison from the inside out by absorbing its very nature. To see how this plays out in real life, look at the ancient king Mithridates. He was basically the world's first extreme biohacker. He was so terrified of being assassinated that he started a practice called Mithridatism, which meant taking microdoses of lethal poison every single day to build up a biological immunity. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and the great physician Galen creates the ultimate physical theriac for the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. Marcus took this physical poison cure daily to protect his body. But here's the absolute genius of it. At the exact same time, he was writing his famous book, Meditations. His daily journaling wasn't just him venting. He was writing philosophical maxims to act as a textual psychological Pharmakon. He was microdosing the terrifying realities of mortality and chaos in his mind so that when real tragedy inevitably struck, he was already immune to the fear. Section 5. From Madness to Virtue. So philosophy, to these ancient masters, is definitely not sterile logic. It is an active, really dangerous practice of translating those venomous manias into stable, protective virtues. We see this therapy mapped out so beautifully in the priestess Diotima's famous Ladder of Eros. Think about it. If a mortal were to suddenly experience the blinding absolute form of beauty itself, they'd be destroyed. It would be a lethal dose. So philosophy steps in as a system of Mithridatic vaccinations. You start small. Step 1, you endure the painful venom of desiring just one beautiful body. Once you survive that, you up the dose, loving all beautiful bodies. Then you step up to the beauty of the soul, then to abstract laws and knowledge. Every single painful bite of desire builds your tolerance, letting you handle a higher and higher dose of the absolute. Until finally, your soul is immune enough to actually stand in the presence of true beauty without shattering into a million pieces.
You know those famous Delphic maxims carved into the Temple of Apollo? They weren't just catchy ancient bumper stickers. They were incredibly precise formulas meant to internalize those chaotic gods. They took the wild manias and wrestled them into a sturdy ethical framework. Know thyself takes that terrifying prophetic mania and stabilizes it into the virtue of wisdom. Nothing in excess balances out poetic mania into moderation. Give a pledge takes the wild risks of erotic mania and structures it all into justice. And trouble is near takes the totally destructive initiatory mania of Dionysus and forges it into unshakable courage. Philosophy literally takes the poison of the gods and alchemizes it into the cure of human character. Once you understand this framework, it completely changes the most misunderstood moment in all of philosophy, the death of Socrates. He's condemned by the city, forced to drink a cup of lethal hemlock poison. And as the poison is literally stopping his heart, what are his final words? He asks his friend Crito to sacrifice a rooster to Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. Why on earth would you thank the god of medicine when you are being poisoned to death? Well, because for a true philosopher who has spent his entire life practicing microdosing death and chaos, the ultimate physical poison actually transforms into the ultimate theriac. The hemlock is the cure to the disease of a shadow-filled mortal life. Socrates didn't just die. He was finally healed. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on. We are all dealing with our own forms of madness and cures today. Take a hard look at your daily routine, the media you consume, your habits, the ideas you totally obsess over. What modern potions are you absorbing right now? And honestly, more importantly, do you actually know if the dose you are taking is acting as your poison or your cure?